Yeah, it's too late.
Here we go.
Let's see what we do. You name it. Okay. I guess I have it. It's good. Thank goodness for some more favors.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It is wonderful to be here tonight. All together, I want to welcome everyone who is here joining us live on YouTube. I want to welcome everyone who is here with me live on Zoom. And I want to welcome everyone to this very, very special family service at Or Hadash, which is not only in honor of National Refugee Shabbat, but is also going to be led in partnership with our students in Kita Gimel-Daled in our 3rd and 4th grade class. Each class this year has been given a theme, and Maura Barbara is going to talk a little bit more about that theme and about our class and what they're going to be doing to help to mark this Refugee Shabbat in a minute.
Can you call this whiny thing over?
But I want to welcome everyone here tonight, and I want to invite Dave, our amazing song leader, to unmute himself as we sing a song of welcome tonight.
Yeah, you right song
Turi, Adonai Turi vegohali, Adonai Turi, Adonai Turi, Adonai Turi vegohali. Adonai Turi, Adonai Turi vegohali. Adonai Turi, Adonai Turi, Adonai Turi vegohali. Shabbat Shalom. And Dave, your for some reason your audio faded out there in the middle of V'hiyu L'Ratzon as I started singing. That was about when you're just before that, your audio sort of went very, very low. So I'm wondering maybe if you can check a couple of your audio settings.
There is a setting in audio for automatically adjusting.
No, I know. Yeah. Hold on, Dave. Can you hear me? Okay. Hold on. Yeah, if you can check make sure that everything's plugged in right, because I know that you do this a lot as a musician. So if you can check to make sure that your stuff is all set. And Warren, if you can go ahead and chat that to Dave privately, that would be great, just in case. And so before we, so we'll make a quick swap out while Dave is checking on his audio settings. And so Maura Barbara, I'm going to hand it over to you for a couple of words of welcome tonight and to introduce Maura Norm and his class.
Thanks, Rabbi Alanna. So welcome, everyone. It's so great to see everyone here tonight. It's great to have our Kita Gimel-Daled students and their families here. When we learned that we were sharing the stage with Refugee Shabbat, we were delighted because Maura Norm and the class had been studying Chesed. And what better connection between welcoming refugees into our country and welcoming people who are seeking a homeland? What better way or what better chesed is there than that? So I am thrilled to introduce to you our wonderful Mora Norm. This is Norm's first year with us at Hadash, and we were delighted to welcome him. And I want to personally thank him publicly because he's been such a lovely addition to our community. We've been treated to Mora Norm reading Torah for us and engaging with us on Shabbat morning and just really doing a wonderful job connecting with our students and their families and sharing his knowledge and his incredible love of Judaism. So it's my hope that that's always infectious with our children and that they very much get that from their teacher. So without further ado, Norm, I'm going to virtually pass the mic over to you and let you show us these beautiful students and all that they've prepared this evening.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, and Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi Alanna, and to all of our wonderful students and their families and congregants. We're really excited tonight, and I'm going to stand up to show you our topic and theme tonight, which is Chesed, acts of loving kindness, and this has been really one of our class's favorite themes since mid-November. It was first inspired by the Torah reading of our patriarch Abraham, welcoming guests in Parshat Vayera, which we got to in about mid-February, and a week later we followed it up with a really stimulating discussion and contribution from all the students. We talked about Chesed being a central theme of Jewish theology, of Jewish ethics, and most importantly, of Jewish living. It's phenomenal that acts of loving kindness become such a central feature of Jewish behavior and Jewish living. So, and it even became more of a connection with the addition of HIAS's International Refugee Shabbat tonight and tomorrow. So it couldn't have worked out better in terms of timing for that. So I'd like to welcome my madricha, my assistant teacher, the fabulous Emily Steinberg. Let's highlight Emily for a moment. And could not do what we do with the students each week without Emily's support and dedication and help, especially with technology. So maybe Emily, you want to take turns introducing the students? Okay, so each of the students is going to get up for a moment. They're going to show you their shirts, and they will announce on their shirts is the name of the act of loving kindness that they will present this evening, and you'll see it on their shirts. And we also have the students will announce their act, and they will then briefly explain and describe what's going on in the picture the photograph that they submitted or a drawing. And I think Rabbi will be able to screen share those pictures.
I will indeed, and so I'll actually call on the individual person because I'll call on folks in the order that I have them.
That's great.
I feel like that'll go most smoothly.
It sure will. Good thinking.
And so first up, we have Adam.
Oh, wow.
My act is return of lost objects, and in this picture, I'm returning my dad's glasses to him.
Awesome.
Yofi, Ashikoach.
Our next one is Ariana.
My act of painting the world, and that picture is me in front of the thing where you donate the clothes and stuff to people.
Fabulous.
Terrific.
And how about this one?
That's the same thing. It's just me at the door and
This is the before picture. This is the
Wow.
after picture.
Ah,
I love it. And what's this one?
Opie.
It's me shoveling snow.
Wonderful. That's an awesome act of chesed that you can do both for your own family and also for neighbors. So Asher,
Oh, wow.
got a close-up of Asher's shirt. Go ahead, dude. Hit yourself off mute and let us know a little bit about.
I did common courtesy respect, and I drew a picture of I drew a picture of a messy room, and then I showed a picture of how it's clean when I cleaned it up.
Uh-huh.
It's beautiful.
Fantastic.
And how about this one? This is you making your chesed shirt.
Yeah.
And I love your sister checking
That's
it
it.
out, that when we do acts of chesed, when we do acts of loving kindness, it's contagious. That people watch us and they notice, and then they pick up that baton and run with it too.
And this is my other sister.
Avi.
Hi, my act of kindness was righteous giving, and the picture was me putting money in a tzedakah box, so to give to charity after COVID is over.
Beautiful. I love it.
Oh,
Eden, how about this one?
So this is piece in the home or classroom, but I did it in my home, and I'm sharing something with my brother.
Amazing.
it's like a game controller, right?
Yeah. That is not an easy act of chesed always to do in your own home. But, you know, one of the things that I notice about chesed, about these acts of kindness, is that sometimes we remember to do them out in the world, but we forget in our own home. We often think of acts of chesed as something we do for tikkun olam, for repair of the world, when we look outward beyond our own boundaries, which is something that we are called on to do by taking this Shabbat each year to highlight refugees and asylum seekers. And also we remember that when we do these things outside of our homes, that we also need to do them in our homes, and vice versa. That when we only care for ourselves, who are we? We don't care for others, but when we only care for others, we sometimes forget those we love the most, those inside of our own homes. And so I love this, the balance between the outside and the inside helping. Ethan, how about you?
My act is visiting the sick, and this is a drawing of me because of COVID, visiting someone who is sick to make them happy.
Nice, I love it.
You can't do it right now.
No, we do our Bikur Cholim through screens right now. We visit the sick on screens right now. Hazel, how about you? It is very colorful, your picture.
My act was kindness to animals. So I taped a bunch of my old art pictures together, and they're all like things that you can do to help animals, like the fish. Recycle as much as possible so you don't hurt a bunch of fish.
Beautiful.
Fantastic. Oh,
How about this one, Milo?
My act of kindness is welcoming guests into the house.
Nice. Hachnasat orchim, welcoming guests, which is, of course, one of the central mitzvot that we focus on when we talk about refugee and asylum. Not just welcoming guests into our homes, but welcoming guests into our national home, but sometimes also into our physical homes, as we help to provide temporary shelter for those who are still getting back on their feet as we welcome them into our country. into a place where they can find safety. It's not always so quick to get set up right away in your own home. And so there are people across our country who welcome people in their homes for short periods of time while people are finding secure housing. And Tyler, how about you?
Mine is honoring parents and teachers. My note says, your parents may not be perfect, but they are the most precious gift God has ever given you. And I just saw that online because
That's awesome.
I didn't want to draw it.
Fantastic.
Nice. This is awesome.
So a hearty yashakoach to all of the fabulous students. They really dove into this. I asked for one picture or drawing, and as you could see, many of them gave us 2 or 3 pictures or drawings. And I'm really proud of all of you, and just very, very proud of having the privilege of being your teacher.
Awesome. Thank you. And so we're going to turn to Lecha Dodi, our song for welcoming the Shabbat bride. On Shabbat, we have this concept of welcoming Shabbat as if she were a person, as if she were a beloved bride who we welcome under the chuppah, under the wedding canopy, but also as a beloved, like we would welcome a beloved into our home. And on this Refugee Shabbat, I want to invite us all to think about what it means to welcome, what it means to welcome someone with open arms and with love, with trust, and with the kind of chesed that we would welcome the most beloved person in our lives with. Because when we invite in our capacity to love ourselves and grant ourselves this opportunity to rest, when we look out into the world and when we make eye contact with each and every human being, we notice that person's capacity to be the most special person in another person's life, and that we would grant them that same love that we would grant our own most beloved, that we actually begin to embrace not only all of those in our world who are in our families and beyond our family, but we are also able to welcome welcome and to cultivate that culture of welcome that allows us to enter into Shabbat, into that day of rest. Because if we're not able to love ourselves, if we're not able to love our family, if we're not able to love and welcome the stranger, how can we truly welcome in the Shabbat bride? How can we possibly welcome in our neshama yetera, our extra soul piece that gives us that extra gift of rest on Shabbat? And so as we look out, we are given that special gift within. And so, Dave, I want to hand it over to you for Lecha Dodi.
Lecha Dodi, lekrat kala, yadada, 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 nishama, yekavela. Lecha Dodi, lekrat kala, yadada, 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 nishama, yekavela.
Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, Hishmi hanu el hameuchad, Adonai echad, U'shemo echad, L'shem u'tiferet v'li tefila. Hey!
Hey, lecha dodi, lekrat kala, yadada, 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 v'nishama, yekavela. Lecha dodi, lekrat kala, yadada, 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 v'nishama, yekavela.
nine, nine. Hey! We rise in spirit or in body as we face the doors to our homes and imagine ourselves facing out towards one another. Boi v'shalom ateret bala, gam besimcha uvetzocholai toch emunei am segula. Boi chala, hey!
Hey, lechato di lekrakala, yadada, 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 Shabbat. Lechavelo, lechato di lekrakala, yadada, 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 Shabbat.
We actually remain standing as we turn to the Baruch and as we bless the source of life. So we are blessed. And I want to share a reading, a kavanah, an intention adapted actually from the Minnesota Council of Churches, prepared in honor of their refugee liturgy. And I adapted slightly for a Jewish context. Baruchu et Adonai, Holy One of Blessing, we are your gathered people, come together to be one with refugees, asylum seekers, and displaced people whose lives have been dislocated by war, famine, and injustice. By our presence here, we express our solidarity with them in their search for a new life, a new home, a new promise. May you clear our eyes that we may see the suffering of the refugee. Open our ears that we may hear the cries of those deep in despair. Release our feet that we may walk on paths where some comfort may spread. Unloose our tongues that we may speak your words of hope and love, and give us open hearts that we may be truly hospitable to the stranger in our midst. And as we hold this intention, as well as the intention that each and every one of our third and fourth graders shared of acts of chesed, as we bless the source of life, so we are blessed.
As we bless the source of life, so we are blessed. As we bless the source of life, so we are blessed. And the blessing gives us peace and makes our vision clear. And the blessing gives us strength and the courage to dare. As we bless the source of life, so we are blessed.
Baruch et Adonai mevorach. Baruch Adonai mevorach leolam vaed. We roll into dark with Ma'ariv Aravim.
Okay. Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night. Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night.
And as we roll into dark and roll into light, we are surrounded by a great love that encompasses the whole world, Ahavat Olam. And rather than our traditional liturgy of Ahavat Olam, I want to hand it over to Barbara for a very special, new kind of liturgy.
Yeah. So some of you may have heard that we're going to have a little bit of a different service next week. And we're going to have a candy Shabbat service on Shabbat morning. And so Rabbi Alanna and I were talking, and she asked me what my favorite Friday evening prayer was. So my favorite Friday evening prayer is Ahavat Olam. And my favorite candy, one of my favorite candies, is York Peppermint Patty. They're very refreshing. So next week, when you come for Shabbat morning services, you're going to be greeted with prayers and candy. And these prayers, like, we're going to recite the prayer and we're going to eat the candy that goes with it. And you're going to have a bag of these candies coming to your house. And I want to give a shout out to our ESC co-chairs and our ESC and our amazing room parents. They're all wonderful. And they're going to be delivering these things to your house so that you can partake of them next week. So without further ado, Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael Amhavta Torah u'mitzvot Hukim u'mishpatim Otanu lemadeta B'te'avon.
Baruch atah Adonai ohev amo Yisrael. The Shema is on page 16. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'otecha, ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha, v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta b'ham b'shivtecha b'veitecha u'v'lechtecha v'derech u'v'shochbecha u'v'kumecha u'kashartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot bein einecha u'chetavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'visharecha. And so from darkness into light, into love, into being present and mindful, we have all of the ingredients to collectively work towards liberation and freedom, being in touch with nature, in touch with one another, in touch with ourselves. We turn together to Mi Chamocha as we hand it over back to Dave for our ancient and timeless song of freedom and redemption, Mi Chamocha. Our ancient rabbis realized something long before, perhaps helped out by the fact that they were writing and conceiving of the order of our service long before the invent of electricity, that the nighttime is scary. Darkness is scary. Raise your hand or put up a reaction if at some point in your life, or share in the chat, either on YouTube or on Zoom, if you were ever scared of the dark. Yeah, me too. Raise your hand or put up a reaction or share something in the chat if the things that you're scared of suddenly become scarier in the dark. That's a big one for me too.
Yeah.
Just after our prayer for freedom and liberation, michamocha, and only showing up in our nighttime service and our evening service and the Ma'ariv service is Hashki Venu, which is a prayer of protection. Protection from sword and famine and enemies, protection from war and drought, protection from things external that are created by human beings, and things that are and protection from things that are external, that are in our natural world, but that we only pray for protection for at night, when the darkness hides the light, when the shadows lengthen, when things that are scary that we can often overcome in the daylight become even scarier. And Hashki Venu is a prayer not only for protection because we need it because it's scary, but a prayer of protection because we trust that when we are tapping into something greater than us, whether that thing we are tapping into we understand as an external force that is divine like God, or whether that thing that is larger than us is a community of support of human beings who, by lifting up the fallen, feeding the sick, sheltering the home, the housing, the home insecure and the homeless, welcoming the stranger, they are performing acts of godliness. Hashki Venu, and especially this setting we sing tonight, that blends together the liturgy of this prayer with the refrain that everything's gonna be all right, that we build that Sukkot Shalom, that shelter of peace for one another. So I want to invite you to put in the chat, either on here on YouTube or here on Zoom, a way that you have brought light into the darkness or experienced the light being brought into the darkness for you. A way that you have helped build that shelter of peace for another person. And I want to invite us to not look at our family experiences. How have you helped build that shelter of peace for someone out in the world that you've never met before, or maybe who was new to you outside of your immediate community? And so together we can share those images of protection from our own lives as we prepare to welcome our speakers in just a couple of minutes from HIAS PA. I want to hand it over to Dave to lead us in Hashki Venu as people are typing into the chat the ways that they've built a sukkah, a shelter of shalom.
Hashki Venu Adonai Eloheinu L'Shalom V'Amideinu Malkeinu L'Chaim. Hashki Venu Adonai Eloheinu L'Shalom V'Amideinu Malkeinu L'Chaim. Everything gonna be alright. Elohim le shalom, v'amidenu malkeinu lechai, ashkivenu Adonai. Elohim le shalom, v'amidenu malkeinu lechai. Everything gonna be alright. Everything's gonna be alright. Everything's gonna be alright. Everything's gonna be alright. Ashkivenu Adonai. Eloheinu le shalom. Amidenu malkeinu lechai.
So I want to invite us to take a couple of moments as we prepare to prepare for the Amidah, to find a comfortable position, either standing, as is traditional for the Amidah, in body or in spirit, or to find a space in the room that you're in where you can feel centered and safe and comfortable. The Amidah, the central prayer in our service, is recited silently at night. And I feel like there is some incredible wisdom in that. Because just as we spoke about a moment ago with Hashkivenu, a prayer for protection, at night we have this opportunity to get centered at the end of a long day, or perhaps on the Jewish calendar at the very beginning of tomorrow. Because, right, the day begins, according to Jewish tradition, the night before. There was evening and there was morning, a first day. And so we have the opportunity to, for the Amidah at night, sure, pray the words in our prayer book in Hebrew or in English or in poetry, but to also offer the prayers of our hearts, the prayer that no prayer book committee, no matter how wise, could ever write down. And as we mark this National Refugee Shabbat, I also want to note that each and every single one, just like each and every single one of our prayers is different from one another's, because we each carry with us our own experiences, our own wishes, our own hopes, our own dreams, and our own hard things that we have gone through. I want to invite us to each imagine what the prayer of another person who's not us might be tonight. If you were someone who was seeking a home that was safe from violence, oppression, war, danger, what might your prayers in your own silent Amidah be for tonight? If you were someone who had found welcome in a new home, what might your prayers, your reflections, your hopes, your dreams be tonight? And as we each offer our own silent Amidah, our own silent prayer, I want to invite us to mingle one wish that you have, one hope, one prayer, one meditation that you have, with one that you imagine coming out of the voice, out of the mouth, out of the heart of another person in our world. And so we enter into the Amidah. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Eternal God, open my lips that my mouth declare your glory. Ose Shalom is on page 30 of Siddur Kol HaNoar.
Oh, say shalom. Yes, shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Ve'al kol yoshvetei Oh, say shalom.
Roma, Huya Asa Shalom Aleinu.
Ve'al kol Yisrael. Ve'al kol yoshvetei Hey, la 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 la
We turn from Oseh Shalom, our prayer for peace, to our Misha Berach Lecholim, our prayer for healing and wholeness. Because those two things, although so often in our service they have such a different energy to them, are so tied. This feeling of wholeness, shlemut, and peace, shalom, share a three-letter root. I feel like our third and fourth graders must recognize, as we say the words shalom and shlemut, that shin, lamed, mem, three-letter root. Because when we are at peace, we are able to seek and grasp onto wholeness in our lives. And when we are feeling whole, we are finally able to be at peace. And so I want to invite us to share names in the chat on YouTube and on Zoom, the names of anyone who you're thinking of for healing tonight. And we add to that list the names of the 65 million displaced people across our world who are without wholeness right now as they seek safety in countries that are not their own, or perhaps even from a country beyond the country where they first settled after they fled. 65 million people across our country. And Cathryn, you'll even correct me if my number is out of date, because I know that my number is pre-COVID. And so I want to invite us to share names in the chat. And we read as well our congregational Misha Berach list. And tonight we are thinking of and sending our hopes and our energy for healing and wholeness to Andrea Abrams Herbert, James Alberts, Roberta Archibald, Arden Bell, Barry Bell, Carol Mueller Bell, Rabbi Deborah Bowen, Sarah Sarulnik, Bill Conrad, Robin Cupo, Francesca Dever, Faye Fishman, Eric Gershman, Jonathan Giannini, Patrick Gibson, George and Gail Glansberg, Hal Goodman, Talia Gottesman, Barbara Granger, Ed Grimes, Amy Gross, Alberta Hall, Cordula Hamish, Peter Hoagland, Chava Hurley, Michelle Kalish, Beverly and Howard Kaufman, Fran Kaufman, Elsie Lieberstein, Len McEwen, Robert Mueller, Anthony Nero, Lisa Nicholson, Riley and Thomas Pablo, Stan Pollock, Abby Rosenberg, Mike Rosenberg, Shelley Sanders, Willie Schneer, Bertha Schwartz, Margaret Steiber, Lloyd Suter, Jeff Taylor, Lynn Van Engel, Isabel Vita, Stan Weckstein, Millie Weisman, John Woolman, Grace Zangwill, Sonia Frischkin Zangwill, Eileen Zeff, Marvin Crane, Barry Tabak, Aaron Marshall, Marcy Cherry, Sean White, Barry Bell, the 79 million displaced people across our world who are seeking refuge or asylum. Peggy Kerr, Mike Whelan, Tom Corley, Talia Gottesman, Millie Weisman, Cathryn Clark Weldon, Jonathan Loeb, Richard Krassen, Arnold Salomon, Karen Griffey, Livia Margalit, Alanna. All of the COVID sufferers are essential workers. June Powell, Bella Mandelbrod, Itzik Mandelbrod, Kenny Gorelick, Florence Weinstein, Dorothy Lyons, Fiona McDevitt, all of those recovering from COVID, our country in need of healing. Herta Kane, and all of those who are in our hearts for healing. We turn to our zine filler, and our prayer in song.
Find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say amen. Mishevera imotenu b'kol habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say amen.
And we I want to invite everyone to rise in body or in spirit as we raise our glass for Kiddush. And as we raise our glass for Kiddush this month, we also raise it in honor of all of those who are celebrating birthdays this month. It's our tradition in our first Friday family service to mention birthdays. And so I'm just going to mention the under, for the most part, the under, let's go with the under 30 birthdays. And I'm going to mention birthdays for February and March because we were missing our birthday list in February. And so we say a very happy birthday as we raise our glass for Kiddush to Ethan Szymanski, who is turning 10, or who turned 10. Layla Szymanski, who turned 6.
Nope, 9 and 5.
9 and 5. Oh, because this got printed out today. And so, yes, they have already turned, yeah, that's their next birthdays that they're turning next year. Sorry, I'll just read names. Ethan Szymanski, Layla Szymanski, David Jones, Amanda Ises, Yael Waxman, Darcy Woolerton Hurley, Franklin Hirsch, who are in February, and also some big birthdays ending in 0. And then in March, happy birthday to Jenny Oswald, Benjamin Luce, Marianne Wilson, Alexis Weisman, a big birthday to Dr. Anita Schmuckler, who is turning 80 this week. Not under 30, not under 20, but we'll fudge it for an 80th birthday. For Caleb Horn, for Brian Amidah, Giselle Ginsburg, Sherry Learn, Elizabeth Castro, Joseph Schimmer, Tess Wachtel, who all have birthdays this month, and we raise our glass in Kiddush to all of you. And Maura Barbara has a very special reading to share, and then we will sing Yom Huledet Sameach.
Okay. Rabbi, Kiddush first or poem first?
Let's do Kiddush first, because we're
Okay.
filling our glass.
Okay.
Or no, the poem first and then Kiddush, yeah. Go ahead.
Hi. So these are the words of Rabbi Rachel Grant Mayer, who I've reworked the words to a child's prayer in honor of those who seek democracy on our shores. We lift this cup with words remembering our people who came before us. We lift this cup in blessed memory of those who fled Egypt so that we could taste freedom as a people on our lips. Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim. We lift this cup in hope of people who seek refuge and asylum in our country. We honor a shared history of suffering. We are commanded to help lift up anyone who is not free. Am Yisrael Chai, free at last, free at last. God Almighty, we wish that every person may be free at last. We fill our Kiddush cup to overflow so that the joy of Shabbat will flow into the week to come. Just as our Kiddush cup overflows, our promise to support refugees and asylum seekers should always overflow too. We need to step up and speak up loudly to welcome everyone from everywhere because everyone deserves to be free. Just as Jewish people have become so much stronger, we need to help all refugees and asylum seekers to become strong, rebuild their lives, and become proud partners in their new communities. We lift this Kiddush cup, remembering the miracles of creation on our lips. Zikaron l'ma'aseh v'reshit. We will continue to create and repair the world as we raise up and build our communities on the collective strength of each person, remembering that every team is stronger when we all come together and raise each other up as high as we can. Shabbat Shalom, let freedom and peace ring out through our land for all who choose to live here. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho b'acharav ratzon yinchalanu, zikaron l'ma'aseh v'reshit, ki hu yom techila l'mikra'e kodesh, Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim, Ki Aleinu Karata, V'otanu Kidashta, Le'avodatecha, V'shabbat Kodshecha, V'yahava Uvratzon, Hinchaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat, L'chaim.
L'chaim.
I am. Amen.
And Yom Huledet Sameach. Shkoach. And happy birthday to all of our February and March birthdays. And I want to give a big yesher koach to all of our 3rd and 4th graders for framing our service with beautiful acts of chesed. I know that some of our younger daveners are going to have to go to sleep very soon because when we noticed that Refugee Shabbat and our first Friday family service were on the same night, at first we thought, oh no, we're going to have to postpone one. And then we realized, no, these two themes actually go really beautifully together, welcoming refugees and acts of chesed. But we did know that at some point we would have to say Laila Tov to some of our younger daveners. And so I want to make sure that we give a wonderful, wonderful yesher koach, a job well done, to our 3rd and 4th graders who shared their learning with us as a kavanah, as an intention for our service tonight. and to their teacher, Maura Norm. Of course, everyone of all ages and stages is welcome to stay at the service throughout the entirety, including our speakers tonight. But I do know that we have to say Lila Tov to some of our younger daveners. And so it is my pleasure to welcome and invite to the Bima Vivian Kane, who is the one of our co-chairs of Social Action Tikkun Olam at Or Hadash, to introduce our speakers tonight and to say a few words about our work on refugees, welcoming refugees, and our work on asylum here at Or Hadash. Welcome, Vivian, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. We're honored to have two wonderful speakers tonight from HIAS Pennsylvania. Just before they speak, I just want to say that we hope this whole month will be a month where congregants think about refugees in particular and immigrants of all types. And we have suggestions of how we can all help refugees. And I'm sure our speakers will give us some additional ways. And some of that is in HaKesher and on the website, and also in our daily links tonight, Sunday, and Monday. So I hope you'll avail yourself with this special list of how we can help refugees. And we're also having a drive for HIAS Pennsylvania, where we're collecting specific kitchen items that immigrant families who are part of HIAS Pennsylvania, these are the things that they in particular need to set up their kitchens. And all that is in HaKesher as well. Our first speaker is Dr. Carol Gauntman, PhD. She is president of the board of HIAS Pennsylvania, and she is also a licensed psychologist. She's been practicing psychology for more than 40 years. Dr. Gantman is devoted to Tikkun Olam and strives to make this world a better place. She's a member of Beth Am Israel for many years, and she's passionate about nature and preserving the natural environment for all living beings. And I'd like to welcome Dr. Gauntman to speak with us. And then I will introduce attorney Cathryn Miller-Wilson, the executive director of HIAS Pennsylvania, before she speaks.
I want to say that it's a pleasure to be here and to share this Refugee Shabbat with everyone, and to talk about the importance of welcoming the stranger, which is part of the mission of HIAS Pennsylvania. And I want to talk a little bit about my work as a volunteer, professional volunteer, and then as a board member at HIAS. And in my comments, I really want to highlight the themes of family and faith, which I think are values that we all share. And of the people that I've had the privilege of working with, those two values are embodied very passionately by most of them. And it's something that I think we all have in common. Tonight in particular, I want to share with you my experience with one very special woman whose name is Harriet. I met her in 2015. She was referred to me by our senior attorney, Ayo Consalo, who is nationally known. And Harriet had come to her seeking asylum. She was in a really bad place emotionally, and she asked for the possibility of speaking to someone in counseling. And Ayo called me and asked me if I would see her, and I was incredibly excited to meet with someone who, who knew that she was in trouble and needed some help. And I met her in 2015. And I want to give you a sense about who this woman is. She was arriving from Sierra Leone, and she had experienced a great deal. But in 2009, this is what the publication from the Voice of America had to say about from her. She said, "We the women, we know each other's problems. Whatever you are feeling, whenever you are feeling the pinch, you're feeling and affecting other women. We need to help ourselves." And then later in 2015, she said, "In Sierra Leone, I became very active in politics and was named National Deputy Women's Leader. I was letting women know about their importance in society, about the roles they needed to play. Then my party lost the election and I became a target. The opposition sent thugs to humiliate and threaten me." And the Harriet that I met in 2015 was a woman who had been a very successful entrepreneur, a businesswoman who owned a restaurant and a catering business, and was asked by her community to run and be part of the government. And she was outspoken. She spoke in opposition to the president during the Ebola breakout. She advocated for the politicians to take some of the money that was coming into the country and get it to the people. And she actually received a call from the president asking her to stop this work that she was doing, or terrible things were likely to happen to her. And in fact, they did. And at one point, her home was invaded, and this was in the middle of the night, and she and her children were assaulted and asked to leave and threatened to stop what they were doing. At the time, Harriet had been planning to come to the United States for a women's conference, and she came, and then she was advised by many people from back home that she not return. And so she decided to seek asylum here in the United States. And when I saw Harriet in 2015 for the first time, she was a woman who was very, very depressed. She had lost her sense of herself. She had to leave her children back in Sierra Leone because they didn't have travel visas. And so she came to protect herself and to flee for her own safety, but left her children back home. And she was very, very troubled about her separation from them. She worried about them. She felt guilty because her political activities are what had put her children and herself at harm. And so she needed some support. She needed help. And what I was able to do, as she told me her story, was to provide a safe place for her, a place where she could cry, we could cry together, and then for her to, over time, to find some strength. And I think that it's really important that this woman looked very different from me. She came from a country that I had never had any idea about how terrible things could be. But she took the stand to speak out against the government and to support the people in her community that she believed in. And this is how she was treated. And I thought of the courage that she held to be able to defend the people in her country, to speak out, and the courage to leave her children and to come here. Why? Because she wanted a better life for her family. And I asked her what she did in these dark times to support herself. How did she find comfort? And she said that it was her faith in God, God who had brought her to my office, that would bring her other opportunities to be united with her family and to find a home here in America. And over the months that we worked together, she was able to grow and to change and to overcome the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder that she had, the nightmares, the fear of men, and to deal with, in a very caring way, her children back home by being able to speak to them. She had arranged to have them leave the country and stay with a friend in the neighboring country of Guinea, where she was able to speak to them on a daily basis. And the attorney that she was working with, Io, was able to, because of the hardship that she had experienced back in her home country, get an expedited hearing for her asylum, and she was eventually granted asylum. But in the time that she was waiting, and at the time, she was unable to work. And so she really had to live off of the generosity of her community, her church. And she really suffered that, because this is not a woman who had known this kind of adversity. But she was very resourceful. She started doing some cooking, and she provided food for people, and she was able to make some money in that way. And it helped lift her up and remind her what a strong and courageous woman she was. She eventually was able to petition to have her children come and stay with her. And I got to meet her daughters, and two of her daughters are now in college. One of them is in high school, and she has become an active part of our community. And I would say that my work with her was life affirming. I came to know a woman so deeply as a woman that I admired and was inspired by. And my work at HIAS Pennsylvania and all of the wonderful staff there who are so passionate about the work they do really enables these people to come and feel welcomed, respected, and admired. And I hope that you will go to our website, hiaspa.org, and read some of the stories about these wonderful women, these wonderful men and children who come and have to leave the horrible atrocities that they've seen in their countries and come and begin again in a place where they want a better place for their family. And it's my pleasure to be able to work with these people. I've been on the board now for 10 years, and it has really filled my life and inspired me to continue to do this work and to make this world a better place for all of us, as these people who come really enrich our country and make it a better place for all of us. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Carol.
You're welcome.
And there will be an opportunity to for people to ask questions to Carol and to Cathryn following our service. But I want to hand it back over to Vivian to introduce Cathryn Miller-Wilson, Executive Director of HIAS PA.
It is my pleasure to introduce Attorney Cathryn Miller-Wilson, who is the Executive Director of HIAS Pennsylvania. She has been the Executive Director of HIAS Pennsylvania since November 2016. Prior to joining HIAS Pennsylvania as Deputy Director in June 2014, she was a visiting assistant professor at Villanova University School of Law, where she co-taught the Civil Justice Clinic and also taught legal writing. From September 2008 to June 2011, she was both Deputy Managing Attorney at the AIDS Law Project of Pennsylvania and an adjunct professor at Drexel University, Earl Mack School of Law. She has been a custody and support master in Philadelphia's Family Court, coordinator of Delivery of Legal Services Committee of the Philadelphia Bar Association, director of the Parents with HIV/AIDS Project at the AIDS Law Project of Pennsylvania, and a staff attorney at Community Legal Services, where she represents parents accused of abuse and neglect. She co-founded while in law school the Custody and Support Assistance Clinic, and today sits on the board of that organization. She's the primary author of Pennsylvania's Standby Guardianship Act, which became law in December 1998. With legal partnership between the AIDS Law Project in Pennsylvania and the Jonathan Lax Treatment Center of Philadelphia, FIGHT in 2007. She's made numerous presentations on family law, the unique issues in families affected by HIV/AIDS, standby publications regarding legal ethics, disability law, and policy and legal education. She graduated from Tufts University in 1989 and from the University of Pennsylvania Law School in 1993, and currently sits on the law school's board of managers. So we're honored to have Cathryn Miller Wilson speak with us. And again, you'll be able to write questions in the chat. Thank you. Oh, you need to unmute. You're still muted.
Uh-oh, Cathryn, we can't hear you. Oh, Cathryn, can you, I think it's probably just not picking up your microphone. Hold on for one sec. Can you go to, do you see in the bottom left-hand corner, the mute button? There's a little caret next to it. Click on that and it'll take you to your sort of audio settings where it says select a microphone. Make sure that you are selecting your headset.
How is this? Is it better?
Perfect.
Okay.
Either that or just ditch the headphones. Go right ahead, loud and clear.
Sorry about that. Well, thank you so much. And I'm embarrassed. You didn't need to read that whole thing, but anyway, thank you very much. Also following Carol Gauntman is a pretty hard act to follow. I've really had the enormous pleasure of working with Carol over the last 2 years as board president. She's unbelievable, really. So incredibly supportive and so giving of her time and her wisdom. And I think Harriet's story is really a terrific one for highlighting both the trauma and the resilience. You know, this morning in a meeting with my director of social services, I was talking about the work. We were talking about vicarious trauma. And she was saying, you know, but the reason I love this work is because I think of it as like vicarious resilience, you know, that our clients, and I said, oh my goodness, Lucy, that is brilliant. I'm going to put that on a t-shirt because that's exactly right. That's why we do this work. You know, if our clients have made it to us, they are the most resilient people on the planet. The decisions that they had to make, the things they had to leave behind, it's enormous. And so just being in their presence, you can really kind of feel this strength, and, you know, let that be something that we can benefit from with gratitude. So thank you, Carol, for presenting Harriet's story. So I wanted to use my time first and foremost to answer any questions you may have. But before we dive that, I just wanted to frame a little bit who's HIAS PA, a little bit of our history, a little bit of what's going on in the world right now, because lots is happening. And then again, take your questions. So HIAS Pennsylvania is 138 years old. I love to say that. I love to talk about HIAS PA. I think it is so incredible. I'm so humbled by being with an organization that has such an incredible history. We were founded in 1882 in Philadelphia by a group of Jews to rescue Jews from terrorist attacks in Eastern Europe. What is interesting and funny and a little known fact is that we were founded a year later from another organization affectionately known as HIAS Inc., that was founded in 1881 in New York. But of course, this was pre-internet. So we didn't know about each other at the time. It was really just a case of great minds think alike. What was happening in Russia, the pogroms were so severe and so upsetting that people were writing to family in the United States and saying, help, what do I do? What do I do? And so people in the United States were saying, come, this is the land of the free. Come, you will be safe. And so the New Yorkers formed their group in 1881. We formed our group in 1882. We, just like the New Yorkers, had the intention of providing social services, because at that time there really wasn't much of an immigration legal system. So the thought of providing legal services wasn't really on anybody's mind. We were going to create settlement houses where we would meet young women at the docks and keep them from getting caught up with human traffickers, and bring them to settlement houses where we teach them English, get them established on their own, get them a job and everything so that they could be settled in their new life in the United States. One of the founders of the Philadelphia group was a Philadelphia attorney named Louis Levy. He was an attorney, but again, not immigration, because there was no immigration law. He was just doing whatever attorneys in Philadelphia in the 1880s were doing. But because he was an attorney, he was paying attention to things that were happening in Congress. And so 1882 was not only the year of our founding, but it was the year of the introduction of the very first public charge rule. And so one of the very first exclusionary acts of the United States. And Louis Levy, seeing that, raised the alarm amongst all the HIAS supporters and said, make no mistake, this is about keeping Jews out. This isn't about poor people. This is about Jews, because who are the poor people that are coming? They're Jews. Why are they poor? Because they're being terrorized by the pogroms in Eastern Europe. So he rallied the troops, did a whole letter writing campaign, tried to stop the passage of the act as really anti-Semitism, but he failed. The public charge rule did pass, and it is the basis for the public charge rules that have been passed subsequently and become ever more stringent. And just like then, the rules that were passed most recently were about discrimination, not about poverty. Although different from back then when it was to keep out Jews, the most recent incarnation was to keep out Black and brown people who are low income. So we see a thread line. In any event, it was a pivotal moment, because here we were about to be founded, about to start our settlement house. And suddenly there was a law that kept out our people. So the Philadelphia HIAS took a left turn right in its founding year and started providing legal services to help Jews combat the public charge rule so that they could come in. And so we continued really in that vein all the way up through and after World War II, really being the tiny immigration law firm that could. And so that's how we were really distinct from the New York HIAS, because somewhere in the 20th century, we discovered one another. And we were happy to discover one another and happy to exchange notes. But the New York HIAS really kept to their original mission of social services, right? Resettlement services. And we were out there providing legal. So that continued all the way through to the 1970s. 1970s was the next major political moment for actually both HIASes. By that point, the New York HIAS had grown to become a national and international organization. We remained locally facing, but they had become national and international. So they were approached by the federal government, who said, look, don't tell anybody, but you do such a good job with the Jews, and we screwed up in Vietnam and Cambodia. Could you resettle them? And just do us a favor so that we can kind of get out of there with dignity. And so it was a big moment for HIAS, who had been helping only Jews, but they looked to their Torah and they saw that welcoming the stranger was 36 times the most repeated commandment. And so they said, okay, yes, we'll help anyone. Once they made that pronouncement, we, who of course at that point were in touch by telephone, and fax still wasn't there yet, but telephone, decided to make the same decision. And so we also in the 1970s started helping people of all faiths. And in 1980, the modern day Refugee Resettlement Act, which is still in place today and still provides the structure, was passed by a bipartisan Congress. Hard to remember a day when Congress was bipartisan, but it was really pretty quickly passed. Everyone was agreed that we needed to create a structure for refugees, and we needed to be a leader in the world for helping to resettle refugees. So that act was passed and it created this structure. And the structure that still exists today is that the State Department liaises with 9 nonprofit agencies, national nonprofit agencies, of which the New York HIAS is one. And they're known as VOLAGs, voluntary agencies, which is, I don't know why, that's just a weird name. So just accept it. And so HIAS is one of 9 agencies. It is the only Jewish agency. And they became the designated liaison with the State Department for resettling refugees. Those 9 agencies then have affiliates all across the country who actually do the on-the-ground work. So the liaisons sign the contracts, make sure that the money is there, and meet every single week and go over the list of people who are cleared for travel. They divvy up the list of those people amongst the 9 of them. And then the ones that are assigned to each one then get assigned to their affiliates across the country. So that's how that has worked since 1980. In 1980, all the way through 2008, the Philadelphia affiliate for HIAS was Jewish Children and Family Services, not us. We were still our little public interest law firm. And so what we did is we partnered with Jewish Children and Family Services. They would resettle refugees, then they would send them to us for immigration legal services, all the way up through naturalization. And then we also helped asylum seekers get legal services. In 2008, Jewish Children and Family Services decided for their own reasons that they were going to get out of the resettlement game. And when they made that decision, we looked at ourselves and said, we'll do it. And so all of a sudden, over 100 years after the initial dream was born, we started finally providing resettlement social services, not just legal. We continued to have a tiny little resettlement team and a large legal team until the election of President Trump. When that happened, and this is, I like this to be my opening joke. So I became executive director at HIAS Pennsylvania on November 1st, 2016. So for 8 days, I had a lot of fun dreaming. And then the election happened and it was like, oh my God, my entire staff and all my clients are under attack. What the heck am I going to do? So it was a pretty hectic time. We had a bunch of emergency meetings. The tenor of the emergency meetings was whether we needed to lay off our refugee resettlement staff because President Trump had made it very clear that he wanted to eliminate the refugee resettlement program. So that's what we were discussing. While we were discussing this, I was really tearing my hair out, not only because I didn't want to lay off people, nobody wants to lay off people, but also because I thought to myself, this doesn't make any sense. We're in an era where our clients need us more than ever before. How could we in good conscience shrink? That's, really counterintuitive. So I racked my brains and actually was speaking at a synagogue that helped me to find the answer. One of the synagogue members asked me a question. They said, I know you provide housing for some people, but when I was trying to help someone and they were trying to get housing, he was told, oh no, you guys don't do housing. And so I explained, oh, we only do housing for incoming refugees. We don't do it for, anyone off the street. It's very limited. It's just the refugees that we resettle. And all of a sudden it hit me. That's the answer. I have to get private funding so that we can have social services staff provide social services to all of our clients, not just to refugees. And if I get that private funding, I can use it to keep our refugee resettlement staff. They'll just provide their services to more people than they were before, so that we can keep the infrastructure, so that when this nightmare is over, we'll be able to restart resettling refugees. And that's exactly what we did. We were wildly successful. In the last 4 years, we've gone from 25 people to 67. We've gone from a $2.5 million budget to a $5 million budget. We have a refugee resettlement program that's pretty tiny. And we also have an immigrant wellness, a health program, an employment program, an education program. And we also have embedded case managers within our legal programs, so that we provide legal and social services from arrival to citizenship. And so that's what we did. And I'm really proud of how we've responded to the crisis, to the crises, plural, because it seems to really never end. But there you are. And so we are poised and ready to welcome refugees again under a new president. And we don't have to create a new structure and retrain a whole new staff. And it's really great. So that's HIAS PA. So let me tell you one more thing, and then I'll take your questions, because I know this is really important and people get very confused. What's the difference between an asylee and a refugee? Who knows? Anybody? It's okay if you don't. Okay. So a refugee is somebody who flees their country because they're getting persecuted based on one of 5 reasons: race, ethnicity, religion, politics, or belonging to a special social group. Notice what's missing from there. Anybody? What's missing? Rabbi?
Gender, I guess gender and sexual orientation are missing, but I guess that could be protected group status?
Correct. That's exactly right. So gender is a glaring omission. But it is, that's how the argument has been made successfully, that women can be in certain countries, depending on how they're set up, a special social group. And so also sexual orientation, LGBTQ. So anyway, so those are the 5 grounds. A refugee flees their country because of persecution based on one of those grounds. They end up in another country where, with any luck, they run into a United Nations official, and they say to the United Nations official, "I'm fleeing, I'm being persecuted, I need help." The official will interview them to determine whether they meet the international definition of refugee, which is the definition I just shared with you. If they do meet that definition, then comes the hard work about, okay, so what are we going to do with you now? Where can you go? Where will you be safe? And there is a determination about whether they should be resettled in a third country, or whether there's any hope of sending them back home because maybe there's been a regime change. Most of the time, there is no hope about sending them back home. So the work goes towards resettling them in another country. How that gets decided is based on treaties that all of the countries, many countries have signed on to. And those treaties, they all say, okay, yes, I will take refugees, and this is how many I will take this year. And so when a refugee comes up and is ready to be resettled, it's like, okay, well, whose country, whose turn is it? So if it is the United States, that refugee then starts going through the United States security vetting process, which is the strongest vetting process in the world. It is an 8-step process. Each step along the way is time sensitive. So a very common thing that happened, particularly in the last 4 years, is that somebody would go through steps 1 through 3. They get to step 4. There's not adequate staffing, because our government refused to make sure that there was adequate staffing and had a hiring freeze. And so the delay meant that step 3's certification expired. If that happened, they had to go back to the beginning and start all over again. So it is a very common story for a refugee to be stuck in a camp for 20 years or more while they're going through this vetting process. So yeah, so it's really, really terrible. So ultimately, when they pass the process, they're cleared for travel. They go on the list, the VOLAGs meet, they divvy the person up, they send them to the affiliates. The affiliates get to decide whether they're going to accept or reject a case. HIAS Pennsylvania usually accepts every case that is sent our way. We then have 10 days to get housing for the person. We meet them at the airport, we install them in their new house, and then we have 90 days to orient the person to the United States. We get them Medicaid, we help them open a bank account, we teach them financial literacy, we get them ESL classes, we help them find employment, we get the kids registered in school, we take them around the subway, all of these things, and it's a 90-day whirlwind. And then we say, good luck and welcome to America. And that's how that works. An asylum seeker is someone who flees their country of origin for the same 5 reasons, but they end up in the United States. Our law, contrary to what the former president seemed to believe, very clearly said that you may enter without status if you are seeking asylum. And so you present yourself to officials, you say, I have no legal documents, but I'm fleeing persecution. When you say that, you're supposed to get what's called a credible fear interview. That interview helps to determine whether you are, in fact, whether you have a kind of baseline fear of persecution. If you do, if the authorities agree that you have a credible fear, then you're instructed to go file for asylum and to, await your court date. One of the problems is the backlog of court dates has meant that many, many people without visas who are seeking asylum come into the United States. They are not authorized to work and they're stuck waiting for a court date, which could take a year or more. What our former president did to try to resolve that was to throw everybody in jail. And so that's not right. So they were in jail without an attorney for years, waiting for their court hearing. So then when that got too expensive, our former president said, okay, we're not going to throw them in jail. We're not going to let them in the country at all. We're going to keep them in Mexico. And that is questionably legal. So there have been lots of lawsuits, but President Biden has rolled back all of those changes so that now we're going back to where we were before, which is to say that you are allowed to enter the country, you're allowed to seek asylum, and hopefully you can find family who can support you while you're waiting for your asylum grant. People who make it to Pennsylvania come to us and we represent them. And we also try to find some temporary shelter for them while they're waiting for their work authorization. So, okay, now I'll stop talking.
Kathy, there was a question about whether HIAS PA is independent or not.
Yes, so it is independent. We are affiliated for purposes of refugee resettlement only, but we're otherwise an independent nonprofit. Something I had to explain to my aunt who sent a check to HIAS National upon my becoming executive director, which was really lovely, but they have an executive director whose name is Mark Hetfield, but
And so I want to thank so much our speakers, both Carol and Cathryn, for such wonderful presentations, and to officially open the floor to questions. I also want to mention that Rebecca Kersner, who is the national director, or who is the director for who is the director for grassroots campaigns and advocacy for HIAS National, has also joined us tonight, fresh from, usually her commute from the synagogue where she's speaking on Refugee Shabbat to Or Hadash is much longer, but it did not take very much time for you to get back from Brooklyn. So we also want to welcome Rebecca tonight if anyone has questions for her as well. But so I want to invite people to type into the chat either on YouTube or on Zoom any questions that you have for Carol, for Cathryn, perhaps for Rebecca. Why don't I add you here and then I'll disappear. Um, and we can have a little bit of a community conversation and question and answer. And if you're here on Zoom, you could actually use the hand raise function and we can call on you. So does anyone have any questions for any of our speakers? A fun fact just got typed into the chat. Bonnie Ritterman just shared an interesting fact that HIAS brought her mom as an 18-month-old orphan in 1922 from Poland to Brooklyn to be adopted. And so a HIAS story right here. Thank you so much, Bonnie.
Great.
I have a question that's come in from Ellie on YouTube. Can you comment on the current situation at the southern border? And is there any potential for a just resolution?
Yes. So things at the southern border are looking better than they were. There's still a lot of work to be done. And I think there's, in my head, there's essentially three categories of what's happening on the southern border. So one is the separated families. The tragedy that occurred a couple of years ago when our government's policy was to rip kids from their parents' arms. So the really bad, or one of the many bad things about that is that now, 3 years later, there are still parents and children that are separated because not only did the federal government take them away, but the federal government didn't keep track of where they sent them. So then they lost them. President Biden has created a commission whose kind of full-time job is to track down every single child and parent and reunite them. So that's a positive thing. The second thing is the policy that I mentioned in my primary talk. It's called the Migrant Protection Protocol, or MPP, which is the protocol that the former president installed to keep asylum seekers from coming into the country where they were sent to Mexico. And many of you may have heard or read about or even experienced yourself from border trips about the squalid, dangerous conditions in Mexico. Many people have been kidnapped because they were vulnerable there, and quite obviously vulnerable. So President Biden has ordered border security to start letting those people enter the country in an orderly fashion. That has started, as you can imagine. On some level, it can never be fast enough, right? Because there's thousands and thousands of people who've been stuck. And so, having people enter orderly, I mean, it's kind of like the vaccine rollout, right? It's been a little bit of a free for all, but I know HIAS National is doing a lot of really wonderful work at the border to try to help that transition orderly. And we, on random occasions, get people who contact us because they're just desperately searching for immigration help. And we always, even though we're not at the border and we really work with Pennsylvanian immigrants, we of course try to do what we can to help the person untangle and get them over the border. And the third category is unaccompanied minors. Unaccompanied minors have sadly been coming to this country in a relatively steady stream since 2008 or 9, because of the huge increases in gang violence in Central America that have really, gotten hurt children. Parents have been murdered in front of them. Siblings have been murdered. People have been kind of pressed into service, and so they escape and come to the United States. The United States had created a way of addressing the needs of these kids, and in my opinion, had done so pretty successfully. They set up very very good shelters with ESL teachers and social workers and so on. And then they contracted with legal services providers all over the country to represent the kids and to get them the legal status they need and to find relatives so that they could safely be moved from the shelter to relatives. And that was a really smooth process. We're one of the people that has the contract with the federal government to provide the representation to those kids. There's a shelter in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and we go there once a week, or did pre-pandemic, and it was a good system. When the former president decided to essentially shut down the border by keeping people in Mexico and not allowing asylum claims to come through, it wreaked all kinds of havoc, so that, kids either weren't getting through and were getting murdered in Mexico, or were escaping and coming through and then were homeless because they had they're kind of literally wandering through the desert. We've heard stories all across the country of kids just showing up places, needing help because they can't interface with government, because when they try to, then the government just throws them out of the country. So in any event, Biden is trying to unwind that situation. And we've already seen, the shelters were virtually empty because of what was happening. And we've already seen in the last 6 weeks where the shelters are filling up, which is good, because that means that kids are coming through and they're going to get the help that they need so that they can be reunited with family and they can get legal status and they can stabilize. The ultimate issue, which I think is really important for people to understand, is the perspective about immigration in general. Our country from the beginning, from that very first Public Charge Act all the way up through today, has always looked at immigration as a thing to be stopped, right? Sometimes the policies have been to stop it more humanely. Sometimes the policies have been harsher, but it's always been like, oh, we have to be careful and limit people. The data, the research and the data shows over and over and over again that immigrants are what make our country strong. That what we need is an absolute reverse, not just more humane, keep people out policies, but policies that are about recognition of what immigrants bring, about encouragement and support, because that's really important for our country. It's also in this moment, and getting back to the 79.5 million displaced people, in this moment, it's critical for the world's safety. Displacement because of climate change, because of war and unrest, because of poverty, is at rates that the world has never seen. And while certainly our country can't take in every single displaced person in the world, and I would never suggest that we should, we cannot, and neither can any of the other wealthier countries, simply turn our backs and put our hands in our ears and go blah, 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 blah. That's not a response to worldwide displacement. We have to put our heads together internationally and recognize that human beings are human and are a human good. And what do we need to make people more stable collectively? So, okay.
Thank you. We have a question from, actually, I have 3 questions here in the chat. The first one, though, is from Shelly Sanders, who is our other co-chair of Social Action Tikkun Olam. Shelly, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Oh, still muted.
There you go.
I was trying to, and I couldn't get through. This is kind of a weird question, but I haven't found anybody else to ask. I had a friend briefly that I met in our synagogue who was from Russia. He was Stalin's bodyguard because he had saved Stalin's life at some point. And as part of his duties, he was a taste tester. Roosevelt was coming to Yalta to talk, and Stalin intentionally left the room to leave Sasha alone with Roosevelt to ask him to bomb the concentration camps, because by bombing the concentration camps, it would slow down the number of Jews that were killed. And according to this guy, Roosevelt's answer was, I came here to become a friend of Stalin. I have no interest in saving Jews. Do you know if that was really Roosevelt's attitude?
I do know that Roosevelt was fairly anti-Semitic. I do know that. I don't know about that particular story, but when Jews here got wind of what was going on in Nazi Germany and were advocating, Roosevelt kept finding excuses to not, well, I don't know. I mean, there, it's a problem. Nobody will support. It's a lot of Jews. It was a problem. And one of the most horrific examples was the turning away the St. Louis, which was a ship, full of Jews. Yeah. And Roosevelt, they were right here, and they had visas to come to Cuba, and then Cuba turned them away. And Roosevelt knew full well by that point that if he didn't take them in, they would get sent back to their deaths, and he refused to take them in.
Yeah.
In my same synagogue, there happened to be somebody who was an American and was on that ship and told that story. So yeah, it was a horrible.
Yep.
Thank you. Since we are on the topic of presidents and attitudes towards immigration, I have a question here from Ezra. Is HIAS aware of any discussions about filing charges for Trump or for others in the administration who were involved in the or others involved in the administration, charges at the ICC or at the UN regarding the child separations?
Yeah, there's been a lot.
The ICC, the International Criminal Court.
Yes, sorry, thank you. The International Criminal Court. There's been a lot of discussion nationally and internationally about that, and I think it's still ongoing. It's understandably disheartening that it's slow. It's a slow process, but I think there's a lot of allegations that can be made, and I think lawyers experienced in this area, of which I am not one, are really kind of sifting through like what is the case that we can make. But the other thing that is an ongoing problem is the interplay between justice and politics, right? So let's say, for example, that Germany, France, and England international attorneys got together and kind of had a lawsuit prepared or had charges prepared to bring him to the international court. There's a question about whether the United States would see that as an attack on the United States, right? Because, and unfortunately, January 6th just reinforced this difficulty, right? So instead of the Republicans taking the opportunity to say, okay, yeah, this guy is a total lunatic, and what you do to him is not something you're doing to the United States. Instead of that happening, a lot of people doubled down. Not everybody, but a lot of people doubled down. So now it becomes an issue of, I don't want to piss off the United States versus, which is unfortunate.
Right.
Yeah. So
wonderful. Thank you. I have two more questions here in the chat. If anyone else, we may have time for one more question beyond them. So if anyone has a final question, to please put it in the chat, either on YouTube or on Zoom. But two questions sort of that are connected. One is, and they're both about next steps and advocacy and action that people can take. One is more general and one is more specific to HIAS PA. From Vivian, what can be done for undocumented immigrants who are not Daca, right? Daca being one very specific program for childhood arrivals. That's the CA part of Daca. Mm-hmm. And then the other is, can you speak to volunteer needs at HIAS PA, i.e. tutoring for U.S. citizenship tests, and also the status of children separate, and I guess this is a separate one, and also the status of children separated from parents, and how HIAS is involved in this situation of reuniting people, and also I guess if there's anything that can be done for those separated children right now, Yeah. So two different questions about sort of next steps and advocacy and action.
Absolutely. So I'm glad you asked that. So we first, let me be very
Sorry, and
clear.
that second question was from Dan.
Okay, great. So let me be very clear. We have lots and lots of volunteer opportunities, and we're expanding them every day. So the one thing that has put a damper on some of the terrific volunteerism that was happening is the pandemic, right? So pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, there are volunteer opportunities ranging from setting up a house for an incoming refugee, to accompanying a refugee to a medical appointment, to providing tutoring both for civics exam, for naturalization, and just general English as a second language tutoring. And then we also just hired in the fall a pro bono coordinator, an attorney. So for those of you who are lawyers, there are going to be increasing numbers of opportunities to provide legal services to folks that need them. And the legal services, there's a huge diversity of opportunities, because immigration law has what we call processes, and there's millions of processes. So for example, if you're a refugee, a year after you come into the country, you're supposed to legally adjust your status to long-term permanent resident. That's a legal process called adjustment of status. We use volunteers all the time to help represent refugees in that process. Once you become a long-term permanent resident, you are eligible after 5 years to naturalize. That's another legal process. We use volunteers all the time to help people naturalize. You also are eligible as a long-term permanent resident to petition for family members. That's a legal process. We use volunteers to help with that. Of course, if you are undocumented, then there's a whole number of legal processes. If you're eligible for asylum, we represent people in asylum. We also use volunteers to represent people who are seeking asylum. You might be eligible for some other kind of remedy. Maybe your undocumented client is someone who somebody else is petitioning for in a family petition. And so we would represent the undocumented person in that process. You might also be eligible for something called a U visa if you're a victim of crime, a T visa if you're a victim of trafficking. You might be eligible for Daca. You might be eligible for something called special immigrant juvenile status if you are a child and you've been abused and neglected. So there's a number of different immigration remedies, and we train and mentor lawyers to help people in those various remedies. And so those are also opportunities if you're an attorney. Since the pandemic has happened, our volunteerism has changed a great deal, obviously, because for obvious reasons, people aren't accompanying people to the doctor, aren't taking people all over the city because they're not having in-person interactions. So we've done some telephonic tutoring. So those can happen. For the lucky clients who have Zoom or who have Chromebooks and Wi-Fi, you can have face-to-face tutoring sessions, but most of our clients only have a phone. So it's over the phone. It's a little tedious and odd, but everybody has adjusted. The other thing that people have volunteered to do is grocery shopping for clients who have conditions that make them nervous about, they have specific health conditions. They're more vulnerable to COVID. And so we have created this whole way where volunteers can get groceries and then drop off in a contactless manner to the client. So that's another way. So all of these things are available on our website. And if you're interested in finding out more, I encourage you to go to Volunteer Opportunities. There's a Zoom orientation once a month where you can go to the orientation. You don't have to commit to anything. You can learn in more detail about all these opportunities and see if there's anything that's right for you. So I encourage you to do that. In terms of the separated children in HIAS Pennsylvania, We encountered 6 separated children because again, where we are is Pennsylvania. So there are separated children all over the country, but only 6 of them were sent to the shelter that we serve. We were able, through a lot of crazy phone calling into the night and across the country, to find and locate the parents and reunify those 6 kids with their parents. So that was great. We will certainly do that again if we encounter another separated child. But so far, the children that we've been encountering have not been separated. They're people that their parents, were murdered back home, or their parents who immigrated here years ago, or their parents who were abusive or neglectful at home, so the kids ran away. Any number of those scenarios. Those are the kids that we're seeing.
Great. Thank you so much, Cathryn.
I have
oh,
one
sorry.
more
Yeah,
thing.
Carol, go ahead.
I also want to know if any of you are mental health volunteers. We do have volunteer opportunities for mental health volunteers. And I want to do a shout out to Dan Schwartz, who has done immigration evaluations for us. And we're delighted to have people volunteer, and we can help them get trained and provide the services as I have done and Dan has done.
Wonderful. We have one final question, and actually this one might be an opportunity for, rather than saying them out loud, to send to myself or to Vivian, and that we can get them out to the community. I had a question in the chat from Harriet, wondering what are some of the studies that you referenced on how economically useful immigrants are in the places in which they settle, or in the case of refugees and asylees, in the areas in which they are settled by organizations like HIAS National and the other 8 refugee settlement agencies and their affiliates like HIAS PA.
Sure, and I'm happy to send them to you, but just
Wonderful.
to quickly,
Sure.
just kick off, Migrant
Sure.
Policy Institute is a bipartisan institute that's done national research on this issue. The Department of Labor has a really great report that came out in 2016 that shows that immigrants are really providing more, and New American Economy. Those are kind of the 3. So one's government, 2 are nonprofit, and there's many more, and I'm happy to share them with you. So.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for speaking with us and for being here and presenting. And God, I wish that we were in person and we could all schmooze at Kiddush together. But I imagine that both of you, your contact information, is available for people who have follow-up questions through HIAS PA. And thank you both so much for joining us. We are going to, I guess if you want to put in your chat any ways that people can be in contact with you if there are follow-up questions as well. But just thank you so much.
I want to give a shout out to my sister Debbie, who made this all happen, and wish her an early happy birthday, a March birthday.
I also, if I could, thank you very much for having us. I know Zoom calls get too long, but I just want to tell you 2 things. I put my email address in the chat. Feel free to email me. Also, feel free to email me multiple times because I'm drowning in email. But it doesn't mean I don't want to speak to you or answer your question. So please just, keep it going. And the second thing I wanted to tell you is that we do advocacy events, and we have one actually coming up. You want to check our website, where we're going to do a letter writing campaign to Harrisburg about the importance of driver's licenses.
Oh, we're doing that.
Yeah.
We're doing that.
Yeah. So great. So we have advocacy events all the time. Just check our website, subscribe to our newsletter. We'll send you stuff. And there you go. So I apologize and thank you very much.
No, thank you so much. And as Vivian just referenced, there is an incredible list of opportunities to get involved that will be shared in the daily links both tomorrow and Monday and possibly Tuesday as well, put together by Or Hadash's Refugee and Asylum Seeker Task Force to get involved during the month of March and beyond, many in partnership with HIAS PA. And so, again, I want to thank you both so much for being here tonight and teaching at our service. And we're going to begin to conclude our service as we turn together to Aleinu. And we rise together in spirit or in body. And tonight, our Aleinu is a slightly different liturgy written by Rabbi Rachel Grantmeyer at HIAS. And I want to invite Vivian Kane and Shelley Sanders, co-chairs of Social Action Tikkun Olam, to lead our Aleinu tonight. And you guys can sort of do paragraph by paragraph. And I shared the liturgy on the screen.
Aleinu, it was on us. It was on us from the moment our ancestors were first forced to leave home, charged with transforming their wandering into a blessing for all people. It has been on us since that wandering became encoded in our DNA, from Abram Ha'ivri, Abram, the one who crossed over, to Ha'ivrim, the Jewish people. All of us inheriting the legacy of centuries of crossing from one home to another as our people became a refugee people. We took on the sacred responsibility to see our story as bound up with the stories of all who continue to wander. Aleinu, it was on us.
Aleinu, it is on us. Love the stranger as you would love yourself. For you were strangers in the land of Egypt, God said, to advocate for a world in which the 68 million people who flee for their lives can find protection and a place to call home. To stand with those who leave nightmarish situations only to undertake nightmarish journeys, so that they may exercise their legal right to find protection in these United States. To cry out for the families who are separated from one another, detained without an end in sight, babies calling for parents who may never see them again, to speak up when those in power shut the doors of our country to victims of violence and persecution, to stay outraged from a place of love rather than hate, from a place of welcome rather than exclusion. These too are our obligations without measure. Aleinu, it is on us.
We know the cost of making any other choice, of demurring from the holy task of transforming our wandering into blessing. As we bow and bend to the source of freedom with visions of a repaired world in our minds, and the commitment to fulfill these visions on our tongues and at our fingertips. Aleinu, it will always be on us to remember that there is no us and there is no them. There are only God's children, each deserving blessings of liberty and justice. Amen.
V'namar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz bayom ha'hu yihyeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. We can be seated, and we turn in our hearts and in our minds and our memories to those whom we've loved and lost at this season in years past as we prepare to turn to Mourner's Kaddish. We mark the Yortzites, the anniversaries of the passing of Joe Aronson, ex-husband of Penny Aronson, Gloria Davis, mother of Barry Davis, Emma Kripke, mother of Cheryl Kripke Cohen, Edward Saul, father of Sandy Saul, David Tchaikovsky, father of Ellie Rosenberg, Shirley Jaffe, mother of Eileen Jaffe, Bernard Kaufman, grandfather of Stephanie Zangwill, Harriet Smolin, sister of Bert Siegel, Herzl Freifelder, father of Rich Freifelder, Anna Elfman, mother of Betty Kahn, Earl Lane, husband of Edith Lane, Miriam Crespi, mother of Scott Crespi and of Jackie Steinberg, and Melville S. Green, father of Eliza Green. And this week we also mourned the passing of Ellen Stewerman, wife of Manny Stewerman and member of Or Hadash. She was laid to rest this morning in North Lauderdale, Florida, and Shiva will be held throughout the week via Zoom, and that's going to be tomorrow night through Thursday nights. We're also in a period of Shloshim, the month following the passing of David Weisman, husband of Lucy Weisman, and of Shelley Pavel, husband of Paula Pavel. And if there's anyone else who's saying Kaddish for someone, I want to invite you to share their names in the chat as well so that we can call them all to mind and to heart as we say Kaddish tonight. I want to invite those who are saying Kaddish or observing a Yortzeit to rise in spirit or in body for mourners Kaddish, along with all of those whose tradition it is to rise for Kaddish. We're also saying Kaddish, Jake Krieger, for his father, William Krieger. Yitgadal, Yitkadash, Shemeh Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon v'yomechon u'v'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru Amen.
Amen.
Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevorach leolam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitchomam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitalev v'yithalal shemeh tekudsha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Lama Rabba min Shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru.
Amen.
Amen. Zichronam livracha. May their memories be a blessing for all of us. And I apologize. It seems that I forgot to turn off the subtitles when we switched back to Hebrew from our speakers. So everyone's been getting quite a fun show of auto transcribing of Hebrew. So I apologize. And we're gonna close tonight first with a couple of words of thanks to Vivian Kane and Shelley Sanders, co-chairs of Social Action Tikkun Olam, who organized this evening's Refugee Shabbat, to Moreh Norm and his 3rd and 4th grade class who set our kavanah, our intention tonight around acts of chesed, loving kindness, and to all of our families. And to, of course, Maura Barbara, our religious school director, who has been fiercely educating our students through the pandemic and just pulling out all the stops and shifting all of the norms when it comes to kid and family engagement as we come up against all of the different obstacles that the pandemic has thrown at us, with all of these technologies that are not built for children, creating truly engaging and sacred spaces and learning opportunities for our kids. And so thank you so much. I want to thank Dave for your music tonight, and your incredible energy that you bring to our service every single month. And a big thanks to everyone who asked questions, who participated actively in tonight's service, who shared, because it is all together that we keep this community alive and that we continue to build and deepen our connections to one another, even as we continue to meet not in the same space, but in our space that is like a string of beads connecting together all of our living rooms and dining rooms and dens into one giant ever expanding sanctuary. So thank you all so much for cross-platform making this Shabbat a special time and a special space for us. And we close tonight with the song Émigré, Émigré. And I want to hand it, Vivian Kane, do you want to say a couple of words about this closing song? Because it was a special request from Vivian Kane. And then I'm going to hand it over to Dave, who's going to lead us in our closing song.
I first heard this Buffy St. Marie song in high school, and it sent shivers. It's actually called Welcome, Welcome, Emigrante.
Emigrante.
And, Emigrante. And it just is a great song. So.
Oh, welcome, welcome, immigrante, to my country. Welcome home, welcome, welcome, immigrante, to the country that I love. I am proud, I am proud, I am proud, proud, proud of my forefathers, and I say they built this country, and they came from far away to a land they didn't know, the same way you did, my friend. So welcome, welcome, immigrante, to my country. Welcome home, welcome, welcome, immigrante, to the country that I love. I am proud, I am proud, I am proud of my forefathers, and I say about their courage. They spoke a foreign language and they labored with their hands, the same way you do, my friend. So welcome, welcome, immigrante, to my country. Welcome home, welcome, welcome, immigrante, to the country that I love. I am proud, I am proud, I am proud of my forefathers, and I sing about their patience. All the work they did with lowly, and they dirtied up their clothes, and they spoke a foreign language, and they labored with their hands, and they come from far away to a land they didn't know, the same way you do, my friend. So welcome, welcome, immigrante, to my country. Welcome, 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 immigrante, to the country that I love.
And so from our homes to your homes, Shabbat Shalom. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening, and we will see you next Shabbat or tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for Torah study, 10 a.m. for services, and in all of the different ways that we gather in community here at Or Hadash. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.